now we're going to be talking about something that is absolutely critical to Nigeria's economic goals in 2024. It is literally what runs through Nigeria's veins, from the hills of the Delta to the power plants to the Dangote refinery. The energy sector is a fundamental anchor for economic stability in Nigeria. And to help us get through this interesting discussion today, I've got three notable experts with me. First, we've got Mr. Ayo Salami, who's the head of the energy line of business at KPMG Nigeria. And of course, we have the founder and chairman of AA Holdings, Mr. Austin Avuru. And last but by no means least, we've got the group managing director of Sahara Power Group, Mr. Kola Adesina. Welcome to the discussion, gentlemen. Great to be talking to you today.
Thank you.
So I'm going to start with you, Mr. Avuru. You know, you are on the front lines, the private sector. And you've seen the assumptions in the budget. We are looking at 1.78 million barrels a day in production and about $77 a barrel in terms of oil price assumptions. From a private sector perspective, are these realistic assumptions given where Nigeria's production capacity is now and given global events?
These assumptions, fortunately, the Honorable Minister pointed out in his discussion, these assumptions are ambitious targets. And I think they were deliberately set to ginger the industry, to up their game, but otherwise they are clearly not realizable. Today, we are doing oil and unblended condensate at 1.46 million barrels per day. That's where we are today. That's 23% shortfall from this budget figure. Today, oil price is roughly where the budget figure is, $77, and fairly volatile within a 5% band. So it could be $74, it could be $80. So we've already maxed out in terms of oil price. In terms of production figure, we are 23% short. And when you build in a 10 to 12% natural decline year on year, it means you are looking for a 40% increase in production to get to 1.78. But even more than that, to get to an average of 1.78 during 2024, you are looking to exit 2024 at about 2.2 million barrels. Clearly not realizable, because I'm not seeing a work program in the industry today that suggests that these numbers can be realized. However, as I pointed out in the beginning, these ambitious targets were deliberately set so that those who run the industry, we know what's ahead of them and what they need to do to meet those targets.
Yeah, it certainly puts the key stakeholders under pressure. 40% increase in production. Our run rate needs to increase from the start of the year. I'm going to come to you, Mr. Salami. Anchored on what Mr. Avuru has said, it's been 2 years now since the Petroleum Industry Act. I think 2021 was when it was passed. I want to ask about what some of the loose ends are. What are the soundings are you getting from the industry about whether the impact of that act is being realized in a tangible way within the sector?
Thank you very much, Mulake. Good afternoon, viewers. I think the important thing to say is that several years ago, we were under a situation where there was no clarity as to the physicals that govern the oil and gas industry. Luckily for us, 3 years ago, we got the PIA. Not a perfect law, but I can tell you there are so many issues that have been thought out about that law. The first and very significant one is around the physicals around gas. The government has declared this decade as decade of gas. And what we expected, right, in industry was a policy or a law that supports that in its entirety. But unfortunately, I must say, if you look at the PIA itself, the physicals around gas seems not to support that ambition. And how do I mean? Prior to PIA, we went to have a situation where gas operations were taxed at probably 30%, right? With PIA, there's a selective treatment. What I mean, natural gas liquid, for instance, produced in the associated gas fields, upstream of the measurement points, are now going to be taxed at a higher tax rate. That, in my view, does not support that agenda of declaring this decade as a decade of gas and using gas as a transition fuel for the economy. Still on gas, if you look at the starting sessions of the PIA, there are themes that suggest that it's going to be a regulated industry, right? You can't have a regulated industry where you're trying to see that industry is safe is a lever of our growth or for transitioning to greener energy. So if gas prices are regulated, either at the upstream level or at the downstream level, that does not seem to support investment in that sector. Because clearly, dollars will go into environment or products or projects that can deliver the right returns. So those are key around gas incentives. Of course, the other angle to it also is to say that prior to now, we've talked about trying to advise the government on selling down NNPC's interest in JV assets. And the convention was around trying to do that very quickly. But with PIA, I think that has, in a sense, shifted slightly to, look, let us do IJV structure, which in a sense puts us in a kind of environment like LLNG where government does not have to do cash calls because the money is not just there. Again, it's something that's in the PIA, but it's yet to take effective root in terms of implementation. I will know there are a couple of assets that have been transited to IJV, but the real assets are yet to be done. So that's also an area. And of course, the other bit is around IPO for NNPC Limited, which one should expect ordinarily should have happened, right? Because we want is a national oil company that is comparable in terms of operation, size, and access to capital like Saudi Aramco of this world. That hasn't happened. So those are the loose ends. I'm happy that in this year's budget, government has a plan to revisit the IPA. And there's a budget for about 200 million naira in the budget for the Minister of Petroleum Resources to see to the review of PIA. So I expect that some of these loose ends will be tidying up.
Indeed, we certainly expect some further steps to be taken on the PIA. But you talk so much about gas, and of course that is a key feedstock for our power sector. If you look at the last 10 years since the privatization of the power sector, can you categorically say, Mr. Adesina of Sahara Power Group, that we've achieved our goals insofar as the power sector is concerned? And then what can we expect in 2024?
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon. Last 10 years, I think it's been very turbulent, most especially for those of us that invested in the sector. And this is born primarily out of the fact that the tariff, which is the price, that's the engine, that's the oxygen of our sector, is not right. So the cost is higher than the current price, and it's been like that in the last 10 years. If you want to stimulate investment, naturally, one of the conditions would be for you to have a right price. So, which is why it's been a big of a problem for us to attract additional investment. For some of us who already we've committed over $1 billion into this, we want to do more. But today, the price is just not right. Our business is a model business, modeled around the critical elements of inflation rate, interest rate, and foreign exchange rate. Of course, the model, as against the reality, there's a great disparity, a major variance. And of course, that is a disincentive for any one of us to really inject additional money. Now, something is happening which I need us to consider as well. Every day in Nigeria, new births recorded is 24,329. Every day. Invariably, you have 8 million year on year.
In terms of population.
In terms of population. So the infrastructure is lagging behind. The investment is not there to cater to this population. So we have a major problem. And that's why you see that in giving out electricity, what we've done now is to segment the market to those who can afford to pay the right price and let them cross-subsidize for those who can't pay. As we sit here today, we were meant to get a tariff review 1st of January. Well, we've not gotten it. We're still waiting. And it's because government is sympathetic to the man on the street, but the business is suffering because we're the ones subsidizing the sector. The investor shouldn't subsidize. It's meant to be government subsidizing or the customer paying the right price. Today, we are not charging the right price.
And in fact, the market segmentation has been sort of a stopgap measure to your ideal scenario, which is a fully liberalized market, at least downstream. We often talk about the fact, Mr. Avuru, that gas is a regional market, and there have been many projects announced over the years of Nigeria exporting gas to other countries. From where you sit, what is the real challenge apart from tariffs, which are key to attracting investment in Nigeria's gas sector? And what are some of the additional things we can do to boost our productivity in gas?
The gas business is an end-to-end business. Crude oil, once you produce crude oil and put it at the terminal,
You're going out.
you get the dollars. Gas, you have to first worry about the consumer, the off-taker, before you even start producing it. Now, we had a projection from 2012 to 2017 to increase domestic gas production from about 700 million square feet a day then to about 2.5 BCF a day. We did that up to 1.1, 1.2 BCF a day, and we have stalled for the past 6 years. The main reason is the power sector that was projected to take 70% of that increase has also stalled at 4 to 5 gigawatts. And so once the demand end stalls, we can put in more investments. I can tell you, in 2015, when I was running Seplat, I had a list of about 11 potential power companies begging for gas, and we're going to increase our gas production. Seplat has just finished, mechanically completed the 300 million square annual gas project. As we speak today, there is not a single potential power company that is looking for gas, that is knocking on the doors for gas. And probably other than Seplat, there's not a single upstream company that is investing today in additional gas production. So once you break any part of that chain, particularly from the consumer side, then you can get started. You can get started. But I must say that other than power, you have the fertilizer industry. You have petrochemicals that hopefully we start with the Dangote refinery second stage. We have industries, a number of industries, and now a new addition to the demand will be CNG for trucks and buses. I expect that to ramp up quite rapidly over the next 3 to 4 years. I mean, in India, 70% of their trucks run on CNG. CNG is 35 to 45% the cost of diesel. So if you manage to convert your truck to CNG, over a 2-year period, you start seeing the gain. So I expect that kind of increase. So overall, no matter what we do, gas has to become the enabler for economic growth. It just has to be. In
fact, the enabler for industrialization on a large scale. And, it's always been interesting when you anchor the gas sector on almost one sector, the power sector. But let's scoot over to another issue. We're talking about the global energy transition. And now more and more companies are talking about hybrid projects that combine solar energy sources with alternative energy and gas, which is still important for baseload electricity. Can you tell us a bit about renewable energy's potential in Nigeria in 2024 and beyond, Mr. Salami?
Thank you very much, Rolake. In terms of renewable energy, we can look at it from the perspective of regulation or regulator, and then the operators as well. From the perspective of the regulation or regulators, you observe that about 9 years ago, I think it was 2015, the Energy Commission of Nigeria actually rolled out the Renewable Energy Master Plan for the country. Under that plan, we're supposed to, by 2025, which is next year, achieve a renewable energy contribution of 10% compared to total Nigerian energy consumption, right? This is just 1 year to that sunset date. What have we achieved? Where are we on that journey? Have we diligently pursued that ambition? I can answer that question. Again, I'm not sure that anybody from ECN is here to attempt to answer that question. But clearly, we need to find out what has happened. Beyond that is also to see that for the regulator as well, and in fact, sometimes I ask, what does the budget provision make for this? This year, there's a provision for about 100 million naira, right, in the budget of Ministry of Petroleum Resources to study the competitive advantages of using CNG, LPG, and the rest as transition fuel for consumption. That's very good. But beyond that, we need to know what is happening to our renewable energy master plan in the context of the bigger energy transition. That's number one. From the auditor's perspective, these projects are very capital intensive, requires a huge amount of money. And like I said later on, money goes to where the returns come from.
Yes.
So investors will not put in their money if they are not sure of returns on their investment. Now, in the last 2-3 years, we've seen some uplift or some buzz around that. Last year, we saw the projects being championed by Naseni in conjunction with the China Great Wall Incorporated, which is one of the biggest West African solar panel production plant in West Africa, being inaugurated in Nasarawa State. We're looking at about $170 million US. It's going to be a partnership between those two entities. Mostly, they're going to provide the seed funding by China African Investment Fund. The other one that we also saw last year was the Oxano 110 megawatt PV solar panel production plant. These are good strides, but again, because of the massive investment that is needed, government needs to come in, either in terms of incentives, to support private sector capital into that sector. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. And you make some very interesting submissions there on projects that are partnerships between some foreign companies and local entities. And I want to ask you, Mr. Adesina, you oversee a group that includes, you know, the downstream utility, the discos and others. Is there space for some of these traditional incumbent power players to venture into the alternative energy sector? And what, from a policy or regulatory perspective, needs to happen for that to be a reality?
I love the posture of the new administration, most especially if you look at the budget. You will realize that for Ministry of Power, $344 billion was earmarked in the budget, and of that, $127 billion was earmarked for renewable energy. Invariably, it shows that, yes, government is really keen in seeing an uplift in that regard. And it is even more interesting to note that of the $127 billion, $123 billion is for capex.
Okay.
One of the things one would want to consistently see generally in the budget is that the capex should be more than the recurrent. That way truly you can push the economy and achieve the GDP of 1 trillion that we're looking for. So from a policy perspective, from the budgetary perspective, that's something we love. As an organization, yes and yes and yes. Why? Because of the fact that we belong to a world we don't want to destroy. We're part of a human community that we must nurture one way or the other. So part of what we're doing is that we're involved in climate adaptation for our assets as we speak today, and we're equally putting money into solar and wind going forward. However, I need to state this, and this is really a bit controversial. Nigeria has gas. I think we need to spend more time ensuring that our gas to power brings us better energy than the renewable. Renewable is okay, but if you want a big economy that we urgently desire to see, with the growing population, it is only through industrialization via big energy.
Yeah.
There should be a conversation in the country around comparative advantage of having gas and using it to create employment, industries and the rest of them. I would want to see industrial clusters grow in a very big way, methodical, well planned, and yet still injecting renewable energy into the space, such that when the grid is not available, at least you can switch to solar and other methods of generating power.
Yeah, indeed. What we need is a balanced and a diversified energy mix. Mr. Avuru, I'm going to come to you for the last word on this panel. You know, there's so many moving parts in our energy industry. On the one hand, we're seeing the advent of the Dangote oil refinery, which could transform the face of the downstream oil and gas sector. On the other hand, many companies in your space are moving towards decarbonization. So I guess, what is your projection for Nigeria's actual energy strategy and how both private sector players should fit in that to ensure that we get this diversity in our energy sources and mix? And what do you hope will happen over the next couple of years as we transition fully to a more climate-friendly world?
First, it's reassuring that we're finally getting private sector investment and, in fact, dominance in the downstream. The refining sector has been constrained for the past 20 years because it was a government monopoly. With Dangote and Bua, hopefully over the next 12 months, we'll find a refining capacity of close to 900,000 barrels per day, at which point it will not matter to any Nigerian which refinery is working or not working, once the capacity is there. Just the same way as we didn't quite remember that there was NITER once the other telecoms companies were operating well. So that constraint will be removed in the downstream. That's in the refining sector. In the upstream, we need to remove the obstacles to investment in the upstream. There has been such a huge constraint in investments in the upstream, from a high of $25 billion a year in 2011-2012 to $5 billion a year on the average over the past 3 years.
In terms of investment.
In terms of investment. Yeah. And that's really the reason for the production that has gone from 2.2 million barrels to 1.3. Really, that's the summary. We need to reverse that investment trend in the upstream, and it's the private sector that can do it. So government's position through NUPRC, and that's one of the key elements of the PIA. The PIA has really empowered the regulator to drive the industry, to drive the upstream. The same way as the central bank drives the financial sector. That's the way the NUPRC, that's where the real issue is. NUPRC has to be target driven. If we want to do 2 million barrels a day, what are the key elements? What is the work program to support that kind of ambition? It's NUPRC, no one else. So government should move through the regulator to ensure that our targets are met by realistic work programs and capital injection from the private sector. The private sector is ready once the industry is enabling. That's what we're looking for.
And all this while decarbonizing and reducing our carbon footprint.
Oh yeah, yes. So first of all, decarbonizing, we decarbonize even in our activities in the oil and gas sector. And then in addition, we manage a transition that optimizes the use of our resources as a nation. So I usually have a chart that shows we should be optimizing our crude oil production over the next 15 years and get the most revenue out of it. And then optimize our gas production for a 20-year plateau, okay? Especially domestic gas production, to fire our industries. And all of this will then generate the revenue that you require to invest in renewables. So it has to be a well-articulated journey. It's not, it can't be. Indeed. Right now, we're not doing exactly
indeed. That also highlights why gas is really the transition to a more cleaner future. It's been such a fantastic discussion. Mr. Austin Avuru, Mr. Kola Adesina, and Mr. Ayo Salami. Well, you've been hearing this expert panel talk about the energy sector outlook and what to expect in 2024.